Another podcast in the books here. Another hunt episode. We're doing a lot of big buck episodes lately, which is kick ass.
It's that time of year.
It's that time of year. It's nice. It's funny because it's after like the craze of late October, November. So then this is when we get our schedule in of all the big buck killing episodes, and we still have, I mean, I don't know, a bunch lined up, and then stuff I haven't even put on the schedule, which is good. It's good. I like talking big bucks, and really, I think everybody else should too. But myself, Kurt Geyer's in studio.
Doug Schmidt.
Eric Hammond.
Austin Chandler.
Ross Baker.
Jordan Gensmer.
Jordan Ginsmer. What's up, buddy?
How are you?
You're kind of like the guest, but not the guest.
Right. I love it.
You've sat in on a few now.
I have.
Pull back and let go. Pink House Neon.
Yep, that's
The
me.
WCB bartender.
That's right. Hired help.
Yep.
We need to do.
Make sure you tip your bartender before you leave, boys.
We got Wade, our resident camera guy, sitting in between the cameras, having an old fashioned. Good guy.
Wonder where that came from.
I made it.
Bam.
So let's cut into it, boys. Austin, you're back at it again, brother.
Man, it's been a hell of a ride, boys. This one's been crazy.
This one's been a little wild.
Yep.
A little wild.
To say the least.
But dude, I mean, this year you killed a 165, right? 160.
So, well, started out with a moose.
Started out with a moose.
So it's been a dream season. I mean,
For sure.
If you sit back and look at the beginning of the season, you really couldn't dream up what has actually happened.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been an emotional roller coaster. It's just been crazy, and just feel so blessed to have had the season that I've had, and to be able to share it with everybody is really awesome.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, the Moose podcast, I think right now is one of the top podcasts of the year. I'll have to double check, but it's up there.
Yep.
So everyone was like rooting for you guys out there, which is cool.
That's awesome.
Came home successful.
Yep.
Then we did, well, it was kind of cool. We did the podcast about your other big buck and a Drury working class on Deercast episode, like back to back, is the way it worked out.
Yep.
And we didn't really plan on it to work. That's how it worked. We had you scheduled, and that's for the Drury one. That just worked out beautifully.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, go from that. And then, so in that episode, you mentioned the other big buck you were hunting that you saw him.
Yep. So my season's pretty much been dedicated to this one deer. When you get a picture of a deer like this, it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, you almost have to dedicate your season to that deer.
Yeah.
He's just such an incredible animal. There was no way I was going to settle for anything less. And
So unique.
yeah, it's just been a crazy story. But the story started last year, actually, when my wife had an opportunity at this deer, and he was a mega last year. And unfortunately, she shot low on him. It was a similar situation to what I had, same spot, same blind, and actually shot right under this deer. So I was tagged out, so my wife got to be in the hot seat. But that kind of started the whole obsession with this deer, and just anxiously awaiting the first trail camera picture for this year.
Did you have a lot of, I know I remember seeing footage of him, right, of last year?
So I have footage of him. I actually videoed him coming out at the exact same spot where he came out the night that I shot him. Pretty wild, actually, to compare the two videos. Actually, I think I shared the one in our group chat if we wanted to pull it up and look at it, but he comes out of that plot and almost walks the exact same way. And
Isn't that crazy?
yeah, a year later, and I can't remember the date on Leah's, but it's within 2 weeks of
no
the same
kidding.
time.
So, you had a lot of trail cam pictures too. I'm trying to remember what he looked like.
Can you pull up the group chat? Because I shared pictures of him from last year. I shared that video. He was gnarly last year. He was more typical. He didn't have as many non-typicals, but he had a big end line on the left side, and then he had a split two on the left side.
Is it and down here in this?
Yes. So that's up top. That was him last year.
These trail cam pictures?
Yep. So go one more to the right. So
oh shit.
That picture right there that picture right there. We were sitting in the restaurant kind of celebrating my traditional season that we had last year, and that's the first picture I got of him, and I'm like, holy cow, look at this thing. Obviously a fully mature animal last year.
So he's got a little scar on his back.
Yeah.
Well, he's thick chested too. I mean, you can tell he's mature.
And this is footage of him last year?
Yeah, this is him last year coming out within 10 yards of where he came out this year and approaching the plot the exact same way. It's kind of grainy there. It's hard to see, but
This must be a video of a video.
it is.
No shit.
But he would. I'm painting a broad picture here. Right? It's Android quality.
Right, yeah. It's like Grand Theft Auto 3.
But you
Jeez,
get the idea. He's a mega last year. Like
Yeah.
I was saying
Wow.
I was saying 60s after seeing him this
Way
year.
bigger than 60s there.
Probably 70. Yeah.
I'd say mid-high 70s, don't you think?
Well, he was. I would guess he's conservatively 70 there.
Yeah.
And came out, gave my wife the shot. Of course, she's not the experienced bow hunter that we all are, and in the heat of the moment, after watching him for 20 minutes, just gradually feed closer. You know, it was a big buildup, and she shot about 2 inches under him. And
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
she was kind of deflated, and she's like, my heart's just not in it after this. I think I'm done. And we still had like a week of season, or a couple weeks, I can't remember. But I'm like, all right, well, it'll give us something to look forward to. We'll walk in and we'll
Right.
pick his sheds up this spring.
Yeah.
So we got snowed in, or iced in, actually. We had a major ice storm,
Last
and
year.
my buck brunch was awesome. Like, I had plenty of food there. I'm like, this farm's going to hold the deer that it typically does in the late season. They just pack in there, and that buck brunch holds them. And when that ice storm hit, my cameras just went dead. I'm like, oh no, that's not good. So that buck brunch was iced in so hard they couldn't dig through it, and they moved out and they went to food somewhere else. And that's
Like something standing or something?
I'm not sure where they went. All I know is they weren't on that farm. So when I went in that spring to pick up sheds, normally I find 30 sheds on that farm on a 160.
Damn.
It holds a lot of deer in the late season. And this year I found less than 10.
Yeah, I do remember us during shed season. You're like, man, I'm kind of blown away by it.
Yeah.
that it's-
It really bummed me out. I was really looking for a big scoop on that one and came up real short. And
Did you hear about anybody else finding sheds to them or anything?
I didn't really know. I mean, not to this deer. I never saw pictures. Nobody ever contacted me. I'm
Don't just
guessing,
piss you off. That's just a squirrel ate them.
I'm guessing they're laying in the squirrel patch somewhere.
That's
bad.
but
God damn it.
that ice last year, it did some goofy shit to deer, man.
It
It
did.
did.
Yeah, the deer still want to come out.
They didn't
Dude,
wanna come
imagine
out.
how hard that'd be on you.
Oh
you
my
know?
God,
It's
it
like
stressed them.
you can't get out of it. It's just all your food's covered up. I mean, man,
I remember I went out late muzzleloader and I couldn't even break through the ice.
Yep.
Having a deer trying to break through that shit.
can you imagine being so hungry that you're eating like tree bark?
No.
Like that just
They survive on a lot of browse when it gets like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it comprises a big percentage of a whitetail's diet when they get iced in hard like that.
Yeah.
And obviously a plot like a standing bean plot shines when you get hard ice like that.
yeah, definitely easily accessible. It's right there. And
Yep.
yeah, I mean, what whitetails go through is just amazing.
Yep.
It was crazy. There was a farmer around us that's a big bow hunter, and he took his skid loader out there and just broke through the ice and scraped it back.
Smart.
I think he had every deer in that county in that field.
Yep.
Well, I mean,
And I actually did that in this plot, but I was just too late. That by the time I knew there was a problem, they were already gone. I should have
Right.
been on it a little bit more, a week sooner, and I probably would have held some more deer.
we had a conversation about that. I think probably right about when this happened with all the ice about, you know, in Illinois, you can't supplemental feed,
Right.
but you guys can in Iowa after season. And it's like, man, when the weather gets brutal like that, it's like,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that we're out feeding deer in Illinois where it's illegal. We're not, but it's almost, it makes you want to be like, fuck the law on this. Like, I feel like it's ethically better to get these deer some food because they're like,
Yeah.
in 1 year, the ice, guys, remember shed hunting? I don't know. Was it Dana? Someone, maybe it was someone just posted online. They found a doe bedded, frozen solid. Like
Yeah.
it rained and then froze.
That was last year.
Dangerously cold temperatures, major ice. I mean, just hard on all wildlife.
Yeah.
Because we got like 3 inches of rain, and then it just the temps just
Oh,
plummeted, and then it kept raining.
I
just feel for 'em.
actually found a shed next to our big pile of round bales.
Oh,
'Cause
really?
yeah, I think they
Eating
were up
the
there.
easy food, any food.
They were eating the easy food that was
Oh, yeah.
not frozen solid. I mean, they were up there munching on the bales.
Man, I mean,
So
makes sense, right?
I was concerned for this deer. Like, I didn't know,
After the rut and then a
yeah.
hard freeze.
He was
and-
healthy enough. He looked healthy when Leah shot at him, but it was still just brutal enough. I thought, man, that deer could have not made it.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through the whole summer prepping that farm for this deer, not even knowing that he'd made it through. Hadn't found his sheds, and just kind of going on a prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And went on the successful moose trip, just practiced all summer, practiced my ass off with that elite. I shot traditional last summer and had intentions of coming back after the moose trip and shooting traditional on whitetails. And it just didn't feel right. I wasn't shooting good. I hadn't shot it all summer. I was just out of my groove. So I picked up the elite. I left my rig the same, shooting a heavy arrow for my moose setup and just drilling tacks with it. I mean, shooting great, 60 yards was very comfortable for me. And season kicked in, and as everybody probably knows by now, I'm a rut guy. I love the rut. And I guess I better back up. I missed the first picture I got of him. He walked by my camera at October 9th, I think it was, and I've got that picture there. But he went by my camera, and I got the side profile of him. And at the time, I wasn't sure that it was him, but I'm like, this is the only deer size-wise that really matches up with like him. Leah's buck's the only buck this could be that I know of, unless it's just a strange buck that I don't know.
Right.
So
Mondo.
It was immediately a suspicion that it was him, but from the side, I just couldn't tell enough. And from the side, he looked like a big typical 10 with extremely long threes.
We all argued about this. Not argued, but we debated it.
Yep.
We strongly debated it about what he was.
And it's, you pull out the pen and paper and you just start scoring in your head, like, well, this times this, this, and this. You guess on beams, you guess on mass, and you just start putting a score together. And right from that first picture, I'm like, I think that deer could be 70s. Like, he's got long tines, over 10 inches, and he's got like an 8-inch 4. I said, when you're looking at 8-inch 4s, you're probably looking at a 70s type deer or better. So the season's rolling. He's not regular. I get that one picture of him there, and then I get another picture of him maybe 2 weeks later. He's on a little clover plot, actually, kind of on one side of my farm, not in the center of it. And the rut rolls in, and he's, I think it was November 3rd was the first picture I had of him in the rut. I was actually setting on the farm, and he daylighted. I was sitting in the stand about probably 200 to 300 yards from where the camera went off. It was like, I don't know, 8 o'clock in the morning. And it's a really cool picture of him. Old gray face, gray ears. His ears are pinned back, so he's pissed at somebody. I can't see the buck in front of him, but you get you can see the drop tine and just see the mass, and it's like, God damn, that's a stud.
Yeah.
And the next day, I'm like, I'm going, I want to get in on that ridge. He's bedding right in there. And that night, he blew up that ridge camera, and he blew up the clover plot camera. So he was on 2 different cameras in one night. So I'm like, this deer is all over this farm right now.
Yeah.
And
he's out moving.
Well, like I said, it'd been, 2 week span between trail camera pictures. And so now I always say strike when the iron's hot. Well, when he's popping 2 cameras off in the same night and you got him the morning before, that's about as hot as it gets. So I go in that morning. This is November 4th. And I get up in the saddle. And if anybody's listened to the first episode on my first buck.
Sorry. Just giving you shit.
You got to give me some shit, but you were hanging out of them too this year.
No, I wasn't.
So what was that episode on my first buck? Like 461, I think.
First saddle buck?
The buck from this year. I think it was episode 461.
Let me check.
I'm sitting there, hanging there in anticipation of this deer, and it was, I think, around 8 o'clock in the morning. This other stud comes in bumping a doe, and I let him walk by, and then I look at him from the back as I'm Snapchatting him.
481.
481, my bad.
You pulled a Doug?
I pulled a Doug. I let him go by. I'm like, man, this is a great deer. He was wide, he was heavy, and he come back, and I ended up cranking him, and he runs like 30 yards and piles up. And I knew the deer. I had pictures of him on another farm, so I get down, look at him, admire him. He's a solid deer. He ended up going 160, almost 165.
Yeah, 164 and like, I don't remember some change.
Yeah.
I measured him. But it's funny because that deer grew on you.
He did. I figured he was solid 50s. When I got down and looked at him, I'm like, yeah, he could be 60, end up being a little better. Short twos, big mass, big frame, nice 4s.
He was fairly like consistent though for the most part through everything.
Very symmetrical deer. Yeah, he's probably my highest netting deer.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'd say that deer is awesome. And it's funny because we put that buck next to my buck, and it's like, wow, yeah, it's like you see two mid-60s bucks, but in different form.
Yep.
Like tall and tine and just kind of like wide and heavy a little bit, you know?
Yep. Very different deer, but scored the same almost.
Yeah.
So
pretty cool.
My intentions when I went into that stand was to not shoot any deer other than this one. Well, that deer gave me a chip shot, and he was just, I mean, he was a mid-60s deer.
And to pass a buck like that.
So I went ahead, I shot him, and I gave him about 5 minutes. I'm like, I can't take it no more. I got to get down and look at him. So I walked over, checked him out. He was awesome. Just really pumped with that whole encounter and kill. And I thought, well, if my chances are really good of seeing this big deer this morning, you know, I knew he was blowing that camera up. I'm like, it's November 4th. I'm going to keep sitting.
Yeah.
So I had 2 tags in my pocket. So I climbed back up in the tree, and I had been there, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 minutes. And I hear a grunt. And it's when you hear the old buck grunt, you can just kind of tell the difference. I'm like, oh God, there he is. And he's behind me. And I turn around and look, and I could see him on the ridge, and didn't have my binoculars up at first. He was probably 100 yards from me, and his head kind of goes behind a tree, and I lift up my binoculars, and I could see the drop on the one side, and I could see this kicker on his left beam. And I'm like, well, I know who it is. There's no reason to look anymore. Like, I'm obviously going to shoot this one. So I put the binoculars down and swung around in my saddle. He's directly behind me. So it's a comfortable shot in a saddle when they're directly behind you. So I went ahead and made the swing, and the wind is blowing.
Sorry.
The wind is blowing right for this deer.
Yeah.
And it's in the morning. So I'm like, well, my thermals are going up. You know, I'm going to be safe. There's no way this deer is going to get me. And he had about a 10-yard stretch there where he was directly downwind of me. And I caught a flash and pulled the monox up, and all I could see is his tail going over the ridge. I'm like, oh no. And I waited about 10 seconds, and the first blow and the second blow. And after about 10 or 15 blows, I'm like,
dang.
Well, he got me.
You're just like, all right, I'm leaving.
We get it.
So pretty much the worst thing you could ever hear. And of course, I'm still jacked because I just killed a stud.
Of course.
But my target deer just pegged me harder than I've ever been pegged before. I've never had a mature deer just totally nail me like that.
You know what's funny? I think the same day Clint had an encounter, or like within a 24-hour period, he had his big mature buck like peg him the same way.
Yep.
Just blew him up like that.
He called me, and we were kind of bouncing off each other like, dude, he's like, dude, I've never had one hit me like that. I'm like, dude, it's the same with me. It's just a big deer. When a big deer gets you, he turns around, tucks tail, and trots
Slips.
out. He gets out.
Yeah.
But this one did not. He wanted
He was
everybody
mad.
to know that I was in his bedroom, and it was
Right.
not right.
Right. Well, I mean,
You weren't invited.
yeah, you weren't invited. Well, plus he was looking for his homie.
And that's when I heard the grunt, it made me think like that wind's blowing to him. So my dead buck's laying 50 yards west of me, and he's straight south or north of me. I'm like, I wonder if he didn't catch the scent of that buck and grunt as he was coming in to investigate. Either that, or he was with the group of deer when I shot that first big one, and he was with that group, and then he was just kind of milling around and came in after all
maybe.
the commotion. I'm not sure which.
Can
but
you imagine if you'd have shot him that day? You'd have just been like a 160 and just another Mondo together. Like,
Nuts.
He was on the trail coming to me. If I wouldn't have been there and he wouldn't have busted me, he would have tripped my camera. He'd have been 20 yards in front of me.
no kidding.
Yeah. So I came very close to doubling on that day.
That's why I buy both tags right away, man.
That's what you have to,
You
man.
have to. I have my buddy, Jim Burns, had that happen. Shot a
Hey,
buck.
should we have him on the podcast?
I love it. Love it. Shot a buck and then had another one come in. Couldn't shoot it because he didn't buy both his tags. And he's like, always buy. And ever since then, I'm like, yep, I'll take 2 combos, please.
Yep, that's right.
2 resonant combo.
Combos with the fries.
Yeah.
Well, when you have a hot doe come in, I mean, you guys have seen it before where there's 5 bucks on her.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I've seen 2 slammers on the same doe before. You just never know what's going to happen. I guess with this experience, that's the second time where I've had 2 slammers come in within a half hour.
Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
when they're there. And it's like, what do you just want to be
You
prepared.
never know.
Yep.
You know how much more our families would like us if we just fill our tags in one day and
Yeah,
They
would
really
have
appreciate
made
it.
the old lady happy for sure.
yeah.
Hey, we only got to fill one.
Yeah.
That's because your state sucks. Actually, I wouldn't be mad if Illinois was a 1-buck state, but that's a conversation for another podcast.
It is.
So this buck blows you up, and you're kind of like, all right.
Shit.
Yeah, I get it. You got me. You win.
So you get your other buck out of there. You do that. We talked about that on another podcast. If you're interested in that story, 481.
Yep.
So how long before there's a trail cam picture or a visual sighting or anything after that?
So I assumed that deer was, he was blowing me up that day, November 3rd and 4th he was there, but he hadn't been regular on the farm. So I'm like, I'm betting his core area is probably a neighboring property. So I just kind of sat back and hunted fringes and tried to really let the heart of that pasture cool out. And I hunted that farm and the fringes of it, just looking for that deer, I had cameras placed all around. I think I had 5 cell cameras going, trying to pick him up, and nothing, just dead. I had a couple nice bucks, 30s type bucks. And on November 17th, I passed a giant 8-pointer, 25 yards broadside, probably low 50s, just a big clean 8, 2 foot wide. I mean,
yeah, that buck's insane.
8-inch brows, just a monster 8. I let him walk, and
you're a strong man.
You are.
Well,
Yeah.
That's no kidding.
This deer was on my mind, and I knew the season was early, and I knew that I had that food plot on my farm, so I had a good chance that deer was going to come back in, and I get to see him.
Yeah.
So November 17th sucked. I let that one go.
Jordan, he's still out there. Just remember that.
He's still running around. Dude.
Anything can happen.
That's right.
So that was the 17th. And
Of November.
By the end of November, 1st of December, it's starting to weigh on you like, all right, it's been, almost 30 days. It's been over 3 weeks, and no pictures, no sightings. Am I chasing a ghost? Like when he blew at me, did he run onto the neighbors and
get waxed by somebody?
Yeah, he got shot with a bow.
Or he's just staying over there.
Our first gun season had already went through. There was a chance that he could have been shot with a gun. So I got nervous enough. I started calling landowners I'd never talked to before.
You did?
I did. I started calling up. I actually got to meet some really great guys that I'd never talked to before. I knew they were neighbors, but I never got to talk to them. Mm-hmm. And they said, no, we don't know of any drop tine deer. I shared pictures. They shared pictures with me.
Did you recognize any deer they had?
They showed me deer that they had shot in the past years and deer that they'd shot this year, and just nothing that was interesting. Nothing of this caliber.
I know what you're saying. Yeah. That's what. Did you recognize any of the deer?
Yeah,
even
a couple of them.
Oh, you did?
Yep, from years prior.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Cool.
But
did you share? Did you like? Hey, I got trail cam pictures of that buck.
Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. That's cool.
And the one neighbor's coming back. He's like, I want to meet you the next time I come back. He knew who I was. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
Yeah, it's cool to have that type of relationship, because you can be like, man, oh, you shot that buck. Hey, I got 2 years of trail cams. I might have the sheds. Just shit like that's cool.
It is cool. And you guys, this is kind of unrelated, but you guys have heard me talk on the podcast about the Big 11 before. Mm-hmm. He lived down by my dad's house. Well, the neighbor ended up shooting him in gun season. I'd passed him twice 2 years ago and had 2 years of sheds from him. So I'm like, dude, meet up with me when you get that buck mounted, and I'll give you the sheds. I'll send you the trail camera pictures and let you know some of the history on that deer. He's like, dude, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Because you'd want somebody to do that for you.
Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yep. So anyways, feeling pretty down, pretty discouraged. It'd been a long, probably 25 days, no pictures, no sightings. And we had some friends in town hunting this new farm that I'd bought about 30 minutes south of my house, 30 minutes south of this farm. And they videoed a monster deer, a big clean 8 that we'd actually picked up sheds from. You were with us that day, Kurt, when we picked those antlers up on my south farm. Doug, you were there.
Yep.
I wasn't there.
Yeah,
Oh, I thought you were when Casey picked those sheds up.
Oh, that day.
Yeah.
That day. Okay.
So our friend Casey picked up this giant 8 that I'd had pictures of. Mm-hmm. Big, massive bladed brows, probably 10, 11-inch brows.
Yeah.
27 and change on beams. 155-inch 8-pointer with a tine that wasn't, other than brow tines, he didn't have a tine that was 8 inches.
Yeah.
Big,
that's
big
a hammer.
Big framey 8. So I'm like, and when they videoed this deer, it's the first time that I had seen him, knew of that he was alive on that southern farm. So I'm like, my big one's not showing up on this north farm where I want him.
Right.
This deer's down here. Would I be happy ending my season with that 8? And after watching the video of him, I'm like, I could hang my hat on that. Like, this is the one deer that I'd probably shoot other than this drop tine deer.
I remember that because we had a podcast that night, and you're like, I found where the big 8 is. I'm going in after him. It could be there, boys. Like, do your thing, man.
Yeah. So I snuck in there and I hunted him that night. This was it was the first day of our second gun season. So I wore my orange in, had the bow in hand, and
how dare you think you're better than all those gun hunters?
We'll get some people riled up on that one too.
I didn't know that was a thing until I killed my buck during second shotgun season with orange on with my bow.
Yep.
And then I realized socially unacceptable to do that.
Right. And we have to be clear, it is legal to archery hunt during gun season in Illinois if you have a valid firearm tag.
For that specific county.
You have to use your firearm tag on that buck.
Yep. Because archery season's technically closed, but you're
Correct.
allowed to use your firearm tag.
Yes.
If you're in blaze orange.
So I went in, hunted that deer, saw a pile of deer that night, but never saw that big 8. I'm like, well, that was fun. And a few days later, I think it was 2 days later, Jordan, our buddy Jordan, rolls into town, and I'm pumped to get him on the farms and hunting. And you hadn't been in my house, what, an hour?
Maybe.
And we're just sitting there bullshitting, and my spy point goes off. I get an hourly report on my spy point cameras. You know, every 2 hours it sends me the report, sends me the pictures. And this was probably, I don't know, 5:30, 6 o'clock when I got the picture. And it was a picture of a big deer. And the picture was kind of grainy enough. It was at 4:20 in the evening, so the light was kind of fading out.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy shit, is that him? Like, that's a big deer. So I requested the high-res image.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how it took 30 minutes probably to get that high-res image. Of course, I was checking it every 2. And the
2 seconds.
the grainy picture turned into a really good picture. And you could see a definitive drop tine hanging down off that right side, and I just about shit. I looked at Jordan, and I was freaking out. I'm like, holy shit, there he is.
Kid in a candy shop.
This camera I hung in this specific place for one reason, and it was to catch this deer coming to that food plot. It was no accident that I had the camera there.
Yeah.
And it'd been there maybe 4 days and caught him coming to that food source. It was a big time plot. So I went in, I did some crazy stuff with borderline in it. I actually created a pathway. So I planted borderline all the way down to the plot and all the way down to the north side of the plot. So there's probably 10 feet wide where you can drive a truck down in between the paths of the borderline. If
Smart.
You want to. Yeah, it gives you a nice entry exit without a lot of deer picking you up.
The whole time Jordan was like, I'm just waiting for him to say, you can go hunt that.
He knew better.
George over there making Play-Doh snakes.
Yeah. Let daddy in there.
And at the other end of the couch, Leah's rolling her eyes going, here we go.
Yeah. She knew that it was going to be on until that deer was dead.
Sleepless nights.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
Hey, bless her heart.
yeah. So,
Yeah, shout out to Leah. She's sweet.
Yeah, sweet girl.
name the buck after her. I mean, I felt bad that she missed it, but I thought, you know what? That'd be a nice name for that buck. That was Leah's buck.
Yeah. She didn't call that she was done. You were like, honey, you're done.
You're done. You cut off.
You're done. You cut off.
Strike one, you're done.
Yeah, strike one. That's all you get.
Sorry.
There's no 2 and 3 in this game, in this household.
Yep.
Ain't baseball.
You got your chance. Now it's daddy's turn.
Now it's the Lord's turn.
Step
So-
aside.
So
Leah
anyway,
hates that too.
I know.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
So this food plot I kind of built for this deer, and I did something different with it this year. I split it into 2 different types of food. So on the east side of the plot, I planted the clover, foundation clover, and then on the west side, I planted the buck brunch. And buck brunch has always been the moneymaker for me. I mean, it's always been tremendous all through the season. So when this deer is coming, the picture's cool because he's looking at the food plot. He's probably 100 yards north of it. And you can see the redneck blind standing up in the background, like in front of the deer. And he's like looking towards the food plot and the blind. So it's a really badass picture. But that was December 5th when I got the picture. When you rolled into town, it was December 5th.
Yep.
And I said, I think I messaged you guys. I said, I'm going in. If he repeats tomorrow, he's going to be in trouble.
Yep.
And the preparation began for that next day. I thought, how can I prepare myself for this shot, you know, because I had a really good feeling. When you look at all the factors it takes to make a big deer get up and move in the daylight, everything was lining up on this day.
Especially that time of year.
Well, it's a great time of year. You know, the second rut cycle's coming in. These younger does are coming back into heat, so that's one. The temperatures were cooler than they had been, so there's a big one. That's probably the biggest one. The barometric pressure was high. Of course, all these factors play in. That's what DeerCast is based off of. DeerCast was saying great. So everything's lining up. You got a picture of this deer going to your food source the day before. I mean, people that hunt big deer know this is kind of the time you need to be in there.
Yeah.
And the forecast in the future was looking like shit. It was warming up. The winds were horrible for the next 10 days. It was a south wind. I could get away with a northwest wind. What I wanted was a north or a northeast, but it was a big time whiskey wind northwest. So when we refer to a whiskey wind, it's a wind that works for the deer, but also works for you.
Very cutting the edge of it almost not working for you. So what was the reason? Why did we end up calling it a whiskey wind? We did that at Club 200 at Ross's place with Kyle Weeder from Whitetail, or from Adrenaline.
Whitetail Adrenaline.
No, Adrenaline Junkies.
Adrenaline Junkies, yeah.
Or
adrenaline,
just Adrenaline now. A lot of adrenaline going on.
That's right.
I don't remember what we... Is it because it's kind of like you're taking a shot at it?
That might be.
Is that why we called it whiskey wind?
I honestly don't remember.
We were drinking a lot of
whiskey, so I don't know.
when we named it whiskey wind. But I think you're taking a shot.
Well, I've hunted this redneck a lot. I put in years in this redneck, and I passed hundreds of deer out of it. So I've got a good idea what I can get away with wind-wise and what I can't. And Northwest is really pushing the envelope. Like, I get busted a little bit every once in a while. Northwest wind, these deer coming off of this one ridge get me as they're coming into the plot because they're facing the winds in their nose as they're coming in. So Northwest wind's about as risky as I get with it. If it's west northwest, I don't hunt it. I get too many of them catch me. So I said, you know, northwest wind, it'll work. Every other wind coming up for the next 10 days is south. Like, I'm screwed after this unless I bring in a hang and hunt the deer as he approaches the food, which I've never done. It's risky in itself. I really didn't want to do that. So I knew that was kind of my day, and for the next 10 days, that was going to be my big opportunity. So I really prepared for that opportunity and that shot. So that morning, of course, I slept 4 hours. So, and I wanted to apologize to people about that if I seem kind of off or not myself. Number one, all this shit that's been going on with this deer has just really beat me down. But I've been running on 4 to 5 hours of sleep since this deer, since December 5th. And what's today? It's been 4 or 5 days.
9th.
It's wearing me down. So I'm not myself right now.
Yeah, understandably so. I think we're all a little tired. We've been kind of grinding here at the working class bowhunter headquarters a little bit. We've double recording and all sorts of shit going on. So yeah, we're all kind of like, you know, blinking hard type of thing. But yeah, anyway.
So that morning I get up and I say, first thing I'm going to do is make myself as scent free as I can. So I bring my clothes down. I wash all my clothes. I do 2 loads of camo. I bring them up, put them in the roller bag, the scent crusher roller bag, and run a 10-minute cycle, crush everything. And I bring my son into my mom's, said, you're babysitting today. I'm going hunting. Daddy's going hunting. I'm going to be in the blind by about 1 o'clock. So the time comes, I put all my camo on. I take my practice arrows out. I put my nocturnal lighted nocks in them to make sure the weight's exactly right. It's breezy, so I want to practice, you know, pretty much my maximum range or around my maximum range that I'm comfortable with in that wind. And it just so happened to be 53 yards that I walked down. I didn't range nothing. I walked out, set it down, ranged back to my chair. Because I set a chair up, I wanted to shoot out of a chair because I was going to be shooting out of a chair in the redneck.
Yeah.
So 53 yards is where the block was setting. And I start shooting and my shots are pulling right about 6 inches. So I'm glad that I shot. I don't know if it was the heavier, because it was cold. I had some extra layers on. I was layered up. My shots were about 6 inches off. So I went ahead and moved my HHA back to dead center. Shot probably 15 or 20 arrows. I was feeling real good at 53. I thought, you know, with the wind and everything, this is probably going to be about as far as I want to go. Like, I'd like to see him within 50 yards.
Yeah.
So I felt confident. I had prepared as much as I could. Went in, got in the blind. It's probably 1 o'clock, and as soon as I get up in the blind, my report comes in from my spy point, and there was a deer that had just exited the plot like 10 minutes before I got into the blind. So I was like, well, that's kind of a good sign. They're already on their feet at 1 o'clock in the plot.
It also makes you nervous when you walk in. You're like, shit.
That's what's
a little bit.
That's what's nice about the way this plot's set up is I crest a big hill, and I can kind of like peek my head up over it, especially with this borderline, because I started the borderline right at the crest of this hill for this reason. It breaks up my silhouette. So I can kind of look down and overlook this plot and see who's in it. And if the coast is clear, then I go ahead and scoot my 100 yards down in, drop down into the bottom and up into the redneck, and I'm home safe.
That's all. Did you wrap that borderline? Did you bring it all the way into the redneck?
Yeah.
Do you wrap? I'm just curious because like if I ever get a box blind, I'm like, do you play the borderline around the base of it?
So I've got my double path where my truck can go by it. It runs all the way through the plot, so it actually divides the plot. So deer that come in on one side or the other, they can't see the other side of the plot, so I actually have to walk through and cross this borderline and come in front of my blind to go to the other side.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
I kind of designed it that way to kind of pinch deer towards me. But yeah, I wrap the back of it. I wrap around the front of it. So if it's quiet enough, I can get down out of the redneck while deer are still in the plot and scoot out.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's smart.
Yep.
Very smart.
That's stuff that you learn from years of experience on a place and knowing like, okay, and I know because you've been busted on that hill before. So you're like,
oh yeah,
I don't know for a fact, but I'm just assuming that you're like, I'm bringing this borderline all the way up on top.
Yep.
Because I'm not going to let that happen again.
To break your silhouette. And honestly, when I approached the blind that night, I kept my profile low. I like bent my back, bent down low. So I was below that borderline. And it might be a good thing that I did, because when this deer, I'm assuming he got up really close off his bed, because it was 3:23 when I saw him at first. So he was up early. Like, I'm guessing probably just got up off of his bed.
So what time did you get in the blind then?
Probably about 1.
Okay, so 3:23 is when you saw him.
Yeah. So we're going a little fast. I'll slow it down a little bit.
Not trying to rush you.
No. It was probably, I don't know, 2:30, 2:45, starting to get about that time when you'd expect to see the first young deer hitting the field, and had a big group come in. It was 5 or 6 little bucks all in one group.
No kidding.
Come in and hit that buck brunch and fed in it.
Little bachelor group.
Yep. For about
Just
10
little homies.
Little homies.
Yep, just little guys, little fork horns, one little 8, all, 1.5, 2.5-year-old deer. And they fed in, did their thing, fed back out. It was about 3:15. I'm like, man, I got to piss. And it's early in the day. I got like 2 hours left to set. Luckily, I had a bottle of water, chugged it, had my piss bottle, went ahead, did my business, and
I'm just thinking of Dumb and Dumber right now.
I know.
Exactly. Sucking on Grandpa's cough medicine.
Oh yeah, what's that? That's nothing, sir. Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
So as I'm like zipping my shit back up, I look out the window and I see movement. I've literally got my pants. He pretty much caught me with my pants down.
Okay.
Like I'm in the process.
He caught you with your dick in the wind.
Yeah, I'm in the
Ass
process
and
of like
dick in the
buttoning, because it's cold. So I got like 4 layers of pants on. So I'm buttoning up all my shit. I
Hey,
look out.
let's be honest. You can't see what you're doing because you got your bino harness on.
Exactly.
Hey, listen, we've all been there.
Yep.
Right? Say you haven't. You have.
Just a little guy. So
Hold out.
So I look over and I can see movement. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me. Like the one time I decided to take a piss, and here he is. I can see tines through the trees. I'm like, no fucking way.
I had to piss for half an hour, and I decided to do it now.
So, okay.
So I literally leave my pants the way they are, pull up my binoculars and look, and there's a freaking drop tine hanging down. I'm like, you got to be shitting me.
How far?
80 yards.
And coming.
Hey.
He's not coming. He's just standing there, just chilling.
Did you? Okay, never mind. I was going to ask too detailed.
Yeah, we're not going to get into that.
Because I saw, never mind.
You get it.
I want to make a joke, but there's no good way to escape.
There's no clean way to do it.
There's no clean way to make a joke without being like, what the fuck are you thinking?
Well, I had to pee, and I had 2 hours left to set, so I'm like, I'm just going to go ahead and get it down to the way when it's slow. There's not much activity. I'll do it before it heats up.
Here's why I ask, or what I was here's why I was gonna make a joke about something I was gonna say, but I decided not to. Papa Dave, when he killed the Geyer buck, was pissing into a Gatorade bottle, and I believe we did a podcast with the Geyer buck. I'm gonna refresh that podcast, I think, and I don't know if he detailed this out, but from what he said, he was pissing in the Gatorade bottle, and he heard something, and he's like putting the cap on the Gatorade bottle, and looks back, and the Geyer buck was walking in. He's like, "Oh shit!"
Almost the exact same scenario.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy, actually. But yeah, so I'll never forget that moment. So get everything tucked back in, and I'm watching.
Okay, so it was out when he walked in.
The meat and taters.
Yeah. So I'm watching him for a few minutes. I'm like, it's going to happen right now. It's 3:23. It's 2 hours before it gets dark.
Yeah.
I mean, this deer's on his feet. He's within 20 yards of my plot right now from the edge of it. So I'm obviously pretty jacked, and I go down to move my bow. I set my bow down, get everything situated. And then I look up and he's gone. I'm like, okay, he'll be, he's just behind a tree or something. I sat there for 20 minutes
trying to find him
and glassing, and there's nothing. I'm like, holy shit, he winded me, or he saw me getting my bow ready and moving it around. He's gone.
You fart in the wind.
Like, there's no freaking way that just happened. I've been waiting on this deer for 30 days, and I just fucked it up.
Because you had to pee.
Because I had my dick out.
Had your dick in your hand.
Yeah.
Don't get caught with your dick in your hand.
Nothing ever good happens with your dick in your hand.
So you can see the roller coaster that this deer's put me through, right? And it's just like one thing after another. Like, it can't just happen smooth. He couldn't have just waltzed into the plot.
No, why would he do that?
So I'm talking to God. I'm just, for 20 minutes, I'm like, please don't let that be the case. Like, he's just back there. He saw a doe. That's what happened. He saw a doe. He went down in the bottom. He's chasing her around. He's going to come right back up. So 3:23 is when I first saw him, and it was about 4 o'clock. I could see, I couldn't see the silhouette, but I could just see something like a brown blob. I'm like, that doesn't look right. And I threw the binoculars up, and there he is. He's about 100 yards back. He's probably close to 130, 40 yards back away from me, looking right at the blind. I'm like, okay, he's good. Like, he didn't win me. He's still wanting to come to the food. We're good. That deer stood there in that spot. Within 3 steps of that spot, he stood there, watched a coyote go by him. He was froze solid. A coyote run 10 yards in front of him. He just stood there and watched the coyote. And he just kept looking at that blind. And what's going through my head is he remembers that shot from that blind last year. And it just makes me wonder if he didn't remember that.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder.
Yep. He knew that blind was there. He knew it was kind of fishy last season.
So what's up with this shady ass box?
Yep.
I would remember getting shot at.
Yep.
Yeah,
You'd think.
that's
I mean,
for sure.
I feel like that's probably something you remember.
Especially in your bedroom.
With a crossbow, maybe.
You want? I mean,
You lose sleep
not
over
forget
that kind of stuff.
yeah, I still remember.
People don't forget.
That guy would have missed me for sure if he would have shot at me. By the way, we need to find out what episode that is just to reference it. But he for sure would have missed.
It's just crazy when they stand there though and just stand there forever, and you're like, what's going through that deer's brain right now?
I think they're just scanning.
That deer was so still and just watching that plot. I mean, he's doing big deer things. He was doing what big bucks do. He was waiting on somebody else to come in and test the waters.
He's doing his homework.
He waited there, and it was a half hour, and then
A half hour of watch.
deer come up the ridge in front of him and came out into the plot ahead of him, and then that's when he decided he was going to come.
He watched that field for 30 minutes.
He watched that field from 4 o'clock until almost 4:30.
Big bucks
No
don't care about
shit.
time.
Yep.
I know they don't, but that's just. I mean,
Hey, they ain't
They
winning
don't
to
care
watch.
they don't care if they stand there for an hour and a half.
He was
they're
there-
gonna stand there until he's
right. He didn't have an
comfortable.
appointment.
He was
or a
there
girlfriend
early.
nagging
He
at
was
him.
there early. He was in the plot by 4:30, way early. Had plenty of time to do his thing.
Yeah.
And after there was, I don't know, 2 or 3 does, 2 or 3 little bucks, half a dozen deer come out in front of him. And like I said, this whiskey wind's blowing almost straight towards him. This little buck comes out and he starts veering to the south where he's going to get my wind. I'm like, don't fucking do it. Don't get my wind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And luckily he disappeared. And then in the video, you can see he actually loops around, comes in behind, and is following that big deer into the plot. So I'm like, all right, big boy's not getting me. He's not getting me. We're good. And I videoed that deer for, I don't know, it wasn't long, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever.
Too long,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Well, I wanted to make sure, I'm like, if it doesn't come together, I at least want the footage so I can kind of figure out what this deer is. Because I had several trail camera pictures, but I never got a good frontal. I could never really put all the pieces
That's when we go
together.
back and we debated, because his right beam wraps around. So at one point it looks like he's a very strangely framed and structured buck. Like he's constructed very differently.
Yep. And when he's coming in, I'm getting an eyeful, right? So I had 30 minutes to watch him and analyze the rack and everything. I'm like, those are definitely, I call it a common 3. You call it a non-symmetry point. It comes off, they basically split at the base of his G3s and come out. And then on his left beam, he's got like a little, it almost looks like a little mini beam starting, but it's just like a little, probably a 5 or 6 inch kicker coming off there. And there's a hole underneath of it.
Yeah.
And what we think it is, it's probably where botfly larva landed in velvet and created this cool little hole under it. But I could see all that for the first time. Like the first encounter I had, I picked out that kicker, but I could never really tell what it was. So I got a pretty good look at it when he was coming in. But
he's very confusing.
Yeah.
You actually have to like handle him to understand how he's like structured. Even measuring him, I'm like,
That looks like a nightmare.
I had to FaceTime Bucky, our good buddy, the measuring guy, Bucky, if you guys know him from a recent podcast. I'm like, dude, what would you do here? Just double checking. I want to make sure I'm doing this right. He's like, oh yeah, you got this. You know what I mean? He's the guy to talk to for that. So like I had to FaceTime him and get like confirmation. And so anyway, like that just goes to show him his structured very strange.
Yep. Very wild looking buck. And the video is badass. You get to see this big bruiser coming right at me, coming into this plot. So he's covering ground now. Once he decides he's coming. So I'm videoing him. I'm like, shit, it's time to do this. So I already had the window open. I'd opened it up probably 5 minutes prior because I could see all these other deer coming out. I'm like, I already want this done. That way I don't have to do it when there's all these deer in the plot right in front of me.
Yeah.
Right.
So the window was open. And he's coming, and it's funny because he cut when he came in the second time, he was probably 10 yards south of where he came in with Leah, so almost the same spot. And then he cuts and he angles the same way he did when he came in for Leah. And he gets to like probably 40 to 42 yards. I already had a little thing of grass pre-ranged. I'm like, okay, so I'm trying to roll and I'm watching him, and he's like watching the blind. He's like pinned right on the blind. I'm like, he can't see me because I had the windows like blacked out with a sheet.
Yeah.
So,
oh, you did?
Yeah. So I knew he couldn't see me, but I'm just like, I'm trying to be careful moving. And by the time I had got my sight rolled, he was already moving away from me. I'm like, oh no. And I'm like, there was my opportunity. He was 40 yards. Now his ass is to me. He's going away. Well, he gets up to the north edge of this plot and he starts chewing on the borderline. And Joe said there's Milo in it, so he was nibbling on the Milo. And I'm like, I ranged him 3 times. I'm like, I don't want to get a wrong read at this distance. 3 ranges, 52, 53, 53. I'm like, okay. And it was just in my head, I'm like, holy shit, that's the distance I was practicing that at the yard. Like all this is just kind of starting to line up. I'm like, all right. And I go to roll my sight and I can't see anything. It's 4:30 in the afternoon, which there's still plenty of light for the shot, but inside that blind,
it's pitch black.
It's getting dark. Like it's not pitch black, but it's getting dark enough to where my eyes couldn't pick up the numbers.
Well, when you're looking out in that daylight and then you try to pull back in,
It makes it tough.
it takes a minute to adjust.
Yeah.
You're for your eyes to adjust, right?
So
But you want it pitch black in the blind for people who don't know, because then you wear either you have camo on, but wearing black clothing helps.
Yep. So I'm freaking out. He's standing there. I'm like, how long is he going to stand there and eat on this borderline? You know, this isn't the primary food source that he came here for. Like, how long is he going to stand here
just a
and
bonus.
chew on this Milo? So I take the bow and I actually lift it up towards the window. And then I can at least see, on those HHA sights on the tapes, you can count in 5s. So I can't really read the numbers, but I roll it all the way to 20. I go, all right, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. And then I roll it a little bit past 50. So I'm like, there we go.
You're in the wheelhouse.
We're close. I clip on. I look at him. He's still feeding on that Milo. And I draw back. I'm like, I knew he was at the max of my range. Like he's really pushing the envelope on the shot that I'm comfortable with. And I do this on my big deer. I was talking to Jordan about how I kind of walk myself through the psyche of the shot. And I always tell myself, you know, whether the deer's 20 yards or 50 yards, I get back in, I look at the shot, I look down, I look at my pin, I make sure everything's good, I make sure I like the shot before I execute. And I got that pin buried on him, and I like the way everything feels, and I touch it off, and I can't, my Luminoc doesn't glow bright enough that I can see it, and it hits him. I can tell that it hit him because I heard the sound. You know, it sounded good when it hit him.
Yeah.
I didn't see a mule kick, but when he takes off and he runs to the north, and you could see in the video, you can actually catch a little glimpse of it. His tail is kind of tucked and kind of twitching real fast, which I thought, well, that's got to be a good sign. He turns, he cuts east, and he heads down this draw, and I lose him. All I can see is the flag, and then I lose him. I watched him for maybe, I don't know, 70, 80 yards. And he disappears over this bluff. I stick my head out of the blind. I'm listening. I can't hear anything. Couldn't hear crash or nothing. And sat back in my chair. I'm just like, holy shit, that just happened. I just shot a huge buck, the deer I've been waiting on for 30 days at 53 yards.
Yeah.
And called Leah first. She was the first call.
So everybody says they call their wife first.
Yep. Called Leah first and told her. She's like, no, you didn't. I'm like, I just did. And you were the second call, Kurt. I
answered the phone. I see, I'm like sitting at home with the kiddos. Austin's calling me. I look out. I'm like, it's still daylight. I said, it's fucking daylight out and you're calling me.
It's a good sign.
Yeah, that's what I said.
What'd I say?
I'm trying to remember because I was so excited because I was like, fuck yeah.
Dude, I just did it.
Yeah.
I just shot him.
I was like, I just remember being so stoked for you. I don't even remember the phone conversation, to be honest, because I was stoked for you.
But I mean, so the emotions are weird because I knew that I just got an arrow in my target buck, but I couldn't see where it had hit him.
Yeah.
I heard the shot. I seen the tail wag, and I'm like, well,
sometimes it's tough at 20 yards to be like, sometimes you see it directly, but sometimes when you shoot, you're like, I couldn't follow that arrow for nothing.
Yeah, and if the Luminoc would have been glowing, it would have helped. Yeah. Not Luminoc, it was a nocturnal. If it would have been glowing, it would have helped so much, but I couldn't see it. And then I called Ross right after that, and I think that's when the adrenaline dump just all hit me at once, and I just lost my shit.
Yeah.
I was hyperventilating. I was crying. I didn't throw this part into the story, but I was emotional on this hunt anyways. So my grandmother passed away at 4 o'clock that morning. And I shot that buck at 4 o'clock that afternoon. Literally 12 hours after my grandmother passed away, this deer came in and gave me that shot.
That's wild.
And I mean, I was emotional anyways, just coming into this thing. And then for whatever reason, everything hit me all at once when I called Ross, and I just broke down.
Yeah, man, that shit's heavy, dude.
It's a big deal going on here. And honestly, I've never talked to anybody on the phone after such a high and a terrible low all at the same. I just hit them all at once. I mean, emotions come out when
I think
you have everything going on at once.
People that don't really understand what deer hunting means to people like us, and then with deer hunting comes family and all that, and you add all that in because it's like I think people on the outside might think that we just want to kill deer, and they don't understand like. A deer, we care about deer. Like we genuinely care about deer. Like we talked earlier, we don't want to see a deer fucking suffer through freezing cold. And we've talked about, we talk about ethics a lot in the history of the almost 500 podcasts we've done. And if you don't know us, then you don't know, and it's easy to call judgment. But if you followed us along, you know that we are the first people to tell you to fuck off if you're going to poach a deer or do something shitty or whatever. But just like the passion and the heart and soul we put in.
Right. I'll go a step further and I'll say that it kind of defines me as a person. Like
100%.
Everybody's got that one thing they're good at. And for me, it's chasing big deer. And when somebody kind of calls you out on that or questions your character, questions your ethics, they're questioning your character as a person.
Yeah, it's fighting words is what it is.
And that's how I felt when I started getting the heat for this. I was jittery. I mean, it feels like when you're getting ready to get in a fight, you're just pissed off. And I was just like that all day. But I guess I just wanted to illustrate that point of how much this deer meant to me. And when I got the shot and broke down, it was just a very emotional time. You know,
100%.
I'd been waiting on that. I'd been waiting on that opportunity for a year, and it finally came around. So very, very emotional, very heavy moment for me.
Yeah.
And to execute that shot at 53 yards, I mean, there's no bigger pressure. I mean, you really can't put a pressure on a guy any more than that.
No.
Yeah.
So it always feels good to execute under those high pressure situations.
Yeah. Well, and even to go even a little further, you know, like, yeah, I agree. Also, I think it defines all of us as people. But I mean, all of us in this room are best friends. Yeah. And would we be as close of best friends? We never all of us never would have met if it wasn't for deer hunting.
Exactly.
And that's a fucking fact.
Yep.
That is a
And
fact.
None of us, how many groups of friends try to get together on a weekly basis and do what we do and get to spend conversational time together? How many other groups of friends do you know that do that?
Slim to none.
Consistently.
Slim to none.
Fucking, I don't know any of them.
No.
Really?
None.
You know? So for someone to come in and question whether or not we're ethical or do the right thing, fuck you.
Exactly.
Legit. Fight us. We'll be at the trade shows. We'll list our trade show dates at the end. If you have an issue, you can meet us outside.
Yep. Hit us up.
We'll be there.
Bike rack 330.
Let's go.
Bike rack.
Behind the swing set. Have an old fucking Donnybrook, boys.
Oh, Donnybrook.
Bring your fucking recurve. So we'll talk to you on a forum. We'll bring Jeremy back.
Yeah. We'll have the security boys there.
Jordan,
it
you'll
won't
come
be
with.
pretty for anybody.
But no, I mean, we're kidding, of course, but I mean, or maybe not really, but really we're that passionate about it. Like, you know, it's, if you want to question who we are as people, this is what we do, man. We care about it.
Yeah.
Like,
Ethics are very important to us. I mean,
we're kind of jumping ahead to.
we are, but
We're kind of jumping ahead to what everything fed off of social media wise, but.
yeah.
So let's if we can go.
Yeah, well,
I wanted to get across like the emotion. It's like, that's, you know, it defines you as a person. It defines us as our friendship, you know, and it's easy to get jumped ahead because we care about it. That's going back to the emotion thing.
Passionate about it, man.
But yeah, I get it, dude. Like going back, Ross is trying to reel us back in. I get the emotion, man.
Yep.
Like that's heavy.
It's not going to get much bigger than that. And that's why I say, like, I pulled off an epic shot. It was the shot of my bow hunting career. I mean, it ended up being my biggest buck, my biggest archery buck. And that's the longest distance I've ever killed a whitetail at. So that was my epic shot of my bow hunting career. For people that laugh at the word bow hunting career, well, I've been doing this for 25 years on mature whitetails only. So I consider that a bow hunting career.
Pretty damn good career.
So anyways, I make all my calls. It probably took a half hour, 40 minutes to make these calls. And by then it's dark. Like I wanted to give the plot a chance to clear out because there's deer. There's actually deer smelling like right where my buck was at. So I'm like, okay, that's, you know, it's kind of odd. So I get down and...
Not to mention for people that in question, you give deer time anyway.
Yeah, that's just the right thing to do. You don't see where the arrow hits. You have no idea where you hit the deer. You're playing it safe. So I get down, I walk over, and the nocturnal is actually glowing, but it's like really faint. So it's not like full force.
Is it one you'd practice with?
I practiced with all of them.
Shot his moose with, and then
you got to get the good out of it. Shit, I'm a farmer.
Saving all those good ones.
Gotta get your money's
Got to
worth.
save that
Pitching
money.
them pennies, you know?
Yeah, I've seen them blow out too when you hit a deer.
Yeah.
like the impact will knock them out.
Well, this one was working, but it wasn't working very well. So it was
some miles on it.
Well, it was a relief to walk up and see the arrow there. I'm like, okay, you know, I got to pass through.
Yeah.
Hopefully it wasn't a bad hit. And I get up and I pick the arrow up and I'm like, whoa, this is not what I want to see. Like, this is kind of weird. So the arrow about halfway up, it looked real, like almost fatty. Like it was real glazed over and fatty. The back of the arrow, I could see a little bit of blood on it, but it was pink blood. But it was like glazed over and weird looking. And I think what freaked me out more than anything was the fact that it was cold enough that blood had time to freeze on that arrow. Right. And it wasn't real wet and vivid. It wasn't the blood that I wanted to see. It freaked me out a little bit.
It wasn't the dripping wet.
It wasn't it wasn't soaked.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I didn't see where the arrow hit the deer, and the arrow's not what I was hoping to see. It's not good enough for me to pick up the trail tonight. There was good blood. There was good first blood at the shot, but it looked the same way. It was pinky. It was pink and hazy, and just, you know, it was just kind of weird looking. On a deer of this caliber, this was my hunt. You know, it was my call to make. I thought, do I take the chance, come in, you know, 5 or 6 hours from now and take a chance of bumping this deer? Because I'm elevated on this ridge where a lot of whitetails can see you. As soon as you start tracking, you're going to be skylined.
Yep.
I'm like, do I take the chance, come in, look around for more blood, take a chance if he's bedded 100 yards up, you know, and blow him out? I elected to go ahead and leave this deer overnight.
You called,
and I called me, everybody, and everybody agreed.
Yeah, you called me.
All of us agreed, I'm sure. But
Well,
I've been on the very same blood trail with Austin in the past, and we waited 6.5 or 7 hours on a deer, the Bluff 170.
Yep.
And I had the camera rolling, came up behind him, and we jumped that deer.
Yep.
He was bedded down, wasn't dead.
And I knew where that shot was at. It was a good shot. I mean, I 10-ringed that deer, but he was quartered into me.
Yep.
Not a super aggressive quarter, but quartered into me enough that when it exited, it caught liver and gut and exited. The entrance looked great, but the exit was far back, and I knew it was. I thought, well, 7 hours, you know, it'd be plenty of time for that deer to expire. Well, it wasn't, and we jumped him up.
And we
you actually
lost him.
seen that shot.
What's that?
You actually seen
And
that
yeah,
shot.
I knew right where that shot was at.
Right.
So moral of the story is we've been there and done that, right? We've bumped big deer before. It's not a good feeling.
It's not fun.
No.
And until you lose deer, and sometimes you don't ever get them.
Yep.
Neighboring properties. I mean, add in all the variables.
Yeah. Any experienced bow hunter knows this.
Yep.
One thing I wanted to talk about before we continue on, you know, when Ross, we were talking about, like, we call each other, we bounce things off each other, analyze, like, hey, you know, the arrow's looking fatty. There's a white hair on it. There's this. The blood's looking weird on the back half. Like, we talked about this. We went through, I mean, we're on DeerCast, going through DeerCast track, and I'm like, man, like, the fatty part and the white hair, and I was like, I hope you didn't graze him.
Or low shot.
Or a low hit, which sometimes can require a lot of time. I've hit a buck.
A low hit can show good blood at first hit. It's probably, the deer's probably going to bleed.
Yep.
But it might not be a fatal shot, or it might be a shot that requires several hours for the deer to pass.
Yep.
Exactly.
I hit a buck low. Like, if I wouldn't have known better and cleaned the deer, I would have said heart shot, but it was just below the heart.
Yep.
And that buck went like 600 yards. I let him go overnight. We ended up finding him.
Yep.
But yeah, low hit will bleed a lot.
Yep.
Even a graze, if you get a graze that's into some of the meat, it'll bleed a lot.
Yep.
You know, and so especially that would be blood right away.
Yep.
So yeah, we debated it. I'm like, man, I don't know. Like you and I went back and forth.
There's so much analyzing that goes on with that shot. If you don't know where that arrow hit, there's so much analyzing and so much question there. It's like, man, there's nothing more that I wanted to do than go in after that deer after like 3 or 4 hours. I wanted to get my hands on him. You know, he was huge.
Well, and even the blood that you saw, it was just real pink and fatty arrow, and it's like, I don't know, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was, and everybody will say, well, pink arrow, everybody knows that's a lung shot. Well, the arrow didn't look like a lung shot.
Right.
And
there weren't
big piles of bubbles. There were no bubbles at first blood. Mm-hmm. So I didn't see any evidence there that I had just smoked 2 lungs.
Yeah.
Now, in hindsight, knowing what happened to the deer, do I wish that I would have went in and tracked for 20 yards? Yeah, I do wish that. But I didn't, because I knew that I would get skylined right there if he was bedded up within 100 or 150 yards.
But I wanted to mention it was 12 degrees that night.
Yep, it was going to be a cold night. I knew the meat was going to be good if the coyotes didn't get to him.
Yeah.
But in our neck of the woods, it's a reality.
It's a gamble you take.
And I can't say percentage-wise what I thought the chances were that the coyotes would get to him, but I knew there was a fair chance that the coyotes would get to him. Mm-hmm. But that's just a call you have to make. Like, do you go in and bump the deer and lose him? Or do you take the chance on the coyotes getting him and still get to recover him?
Right.
You know, if Mother Nature's on your side, you go in and everything's perfect and the deer's laying there untouched in the morning.
Yeah.
And there's a good chance that could have happened.
Well, I think another thing I think a lot of internet warriors forget is, go in, bump him, he runs to the neighbors. You can't get a hold of the neighbor. In Illinois, if the neighbor tells you, fuck off, you're not going, guess what? You can't go.
Yep.
Right.
In Iowa, you can.
Yep.
Illinois, you're out of luck. Yep. So how much do you gamble?
Yep.
I think, Austin, back out. It's on your property. It's 12 degrees. Go get them in the morning.
Well, every bow hunter knows the old saying, when in doubt, back out. And when you don't see an arrow hit a deer, that's red flag number one.
Yep.
Any experienced bow hunter knows this. If you don't see that deer fall and you don't see the point of impact and you don't see the arrow that you want to see, you back out.
You back out.
Absolutely.
I think right there, we don't, even though we probably will here in a bit, explanation, done.
Yep.
You have a problem with that? Shut the podcast off.
We're moving on.
Moving on.
So we get everybody rounded up in the morning and we roll in. Ross rolls in with me. We take my sweet ass Suzuki X90 in. Jordan does a badass video going in.
Yep. Badass.
It's on our socials. Thank you, Jordan. That thing is badass. We need to do a video tour of that thing.
For sure. I like the working class wrap idea. I think that needs to happen.
I still think you should need to get a wrap printed that's like turkey feather pattern.
Maybe we'd do a combo with a hybrid of the two, if you
We
will.
got a leaky tire we need to fix too.
Oh,
Yeah,
leaky
that's
tire.
minor details.
Fill it with
The
that
doors
green
need some
slime.
WD-40
Not now,
put on
Jordan.
them. It's fine.
We got
Not
we got
now,
air
Jordan.
compressors, man.
As long as the T-tops still work.
I'm
we're
trying
good.
to sell this thing, Jordan. I'm trying to up the value of it, all right?
What are tires really?
So we roll in and it's cold. I mean, we're bundled up. You can see our breath. I mean, it's cold. I think it was 14 or 15 degrees that morning. So I'm like, well, this is
chilly.
good. You know, if he was hit bad, this is going to be good to help finish him off.
Yeah.
And we start in on that trail, and in the daylight looks totally different than it did at night. I looked at first sign and first blood with my shitty ass flashlight on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
So in the daylight, it's like, oh damn, that looks good.
Way better than last night.
Right off the rip.
Mm-hmm.
So the first 5 yards looked good. Then it kind of petered out for 10 or 20 yards. And then after that, it's like, okay, he's bleeding out both sides.
Which if you would have went 10 or 20 yards and saw that, you would have backed out anyway.
Maybe.
Yeah, but he had just ran over the ridge. So is he bedded right at the bottom of that
Yeah.
ridge? Or,
Right.
And like Austin said, he might daylight or John Wayne him.
Yep.
You know, looking up that ridge if he's bedded down low. So
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're cooking. I mean, once we get like 30 yards in, I'm like, oh boys,
We better go.
Here we go. This is looking real good. And we're looking up and we're following the blood trail. I mean, 20 yards, 30 yards up ahead of us, you can see the blood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh shit, this is good. I'm feeling real good about this. And we go to about where I last seen him. He dips down into this bottom. And I crest that bottom, and I'm kind of looking. I'm like, okay, he's not at the bottom. Where is he? Like, I'm starting to freak out. Like, that deer, if he's hit the way I think he is, he should be right there.
Yeah.
And I looked down the ridge, and I could see red. I'm like, uh-oh, there he is, boys. And as soon as I saw it, I knew the coyotes had got to him.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I was elated that the deer was there, wanted to recover this deer. And then you have the other emotion of, well, you know, I've lost him. The coyotes got him.
Yeah.
So we walk down the ridge, we get to him, and this deer is destroyed. I mean, the deer that we bumped got taken by coyotes as well. We had to leave him overnight.
Yep.
So I've had to leave 2 big bucks. I've had to leave 3 big bucks overnight. 2 of them have got taken by the coyotes.
Mm-hmm.
in 25 years.
In 25 years.
One was a 50 to 60%. This one happened to be like 100%.
Yep. They took all of him. They didn't just start at the ass and work on the ass like sometimes they'll do.
Mm-hmm.
This deer was gone. I mean, no meat in the ribs. They actually chewed one of his ears off and chewed his nose off.
That right there is like,
It's mind blowing.
I've never seen that.
extreme.
I've never seen that
clean.
in pictures or anything. I mean, just wild.
I've never seen that on a deadhead that's been laying that I found in like shed season.
And like
Right.
Jordan and I were talking a little earlier when we were all 3 on that recovery. There was nothing fresh about it. Like it had been there. Like they got on that thing
right away.
right away.
looking at that blood, and that's why a lot of people were like, well, how can you call it a double lung shot if the carcass looked like that? When you've bow hunted for a while and you see that blood trail, you kind of understand what happened, right? And people will say, well, why didn't you get on the blood trail then? Well, I think we've already explained that.
Yeah, we've already explained.
So following the blood trail, it was pretty evident that it was a double lung hit. I mean, that deer ran 150 yards, and the only reason he made it that far is because he was going downhill for 50 of it. He didn't try to bed in any cover. He was piled up in the middle of an open road. I mean, this deer was dead on his feet. I'm guessing within 2 or 3 minutes, this deer was probably expired.
Yeah.
So that in itself was the most important thing to me, was this deer did not suffer. I executed a great shot. I didn't know it at the time. I was nervous, but it ended up being a great shot, an epic shot, the shot of my career, however I want to word it.
Yeah.
That's the shot that I made. So bittersweet, you know, we were checking the deer out, and obviously, I mean, he's massive, and just emotional. Like I said, an emotional roller coaster. You don't get to put your hands on a whitetail like this every year.
No.
I've been doing it for 25 years. He's my biggest bow deer. Just gnarly. I mean, I've got the score sheet here, but I know most of it anyways. I mean, he's 17 and 17 and a quarter wide, narrow deer. He's got 3 tines over 11. He's got 1 over 10. He's got 2 over 9. He's actually an 8-point mainframe with matching common threes on both sides. And when you look at him from the front, his main tines stay in line, and then he's got these common threes that kind of kick out to the side. So, which makes him look awesome.
Yeah. Confusing.
Yeah.
But like confusingly cool.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it. It's hard to explain.
that's right.
It's a
way to say
weird
it.
framed deer.
Yeah.
He's got 2 little burrs on his left beam at the base. He's got that, like I said, that little hole on his left beam that creates another tine that
Kicker.
comes out.
That was challenging to measure. Had to do some thinking on that.
He's got a little piece. Looks like a little piece of popcorn down there.
Yeah, this little guy, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
And then he's got like a 5-inch drop. Nice beams, 25 on beams.
Go through his abnormals. What's his total in abnormals?
Well, if you were counting these,
Yeah, they are. They are.
you'd have over 30 inches of abnormals.
Yeah.
So
Once I measured that up, I was like, "Oh, Daddy,
yeah.
we're in for something good."
We're onto something here.
Yeah.
And we knew he was good, right? I was just counting those abnormals as 4s and counting him as a 10. I'm like,
Yeah.
As soon as we walked up on him, I'm like, Ross, this deer's 80.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, that deer's 80. From the cameras, I was, guessing low 70s was my honest guess.
Yeah. Yeah, we debated that a lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was heavier. His mass was better. He was a little taller than I thought. Ended up coming out at 189 and a half, which beats my other double drop tine archery buck, which was 188.
That's insane, man. I know. So I thank you for letting me measure this deer.
Oh, I measured him myself, and I come up with like 186.
We talked how you're always short.
I'm usually stingy with my own deer, which it's fun because I know that they're probably going to grow an inch or two.
Yeah.
Which is fine with me.
So for people that are new to listening to the podcast, I've been an official measurer for 11 years.
Yep.
So almost 12 years. So that's why I remeasured it for Austin. Well, you just greened it real quick.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, I've measured deer for Austin in the past, and then I'm always like 2 inches.
2 or 3 inches off usually.
2 or 3 inches bigger. I've watched Austin measure baselines. I'm like, dude, give him what he is.
I'm stingy. I'm stingy with that. I don't want to be the guy that overscores my own deer.
I get it, but I'm like, dude, whatever. We'll have to have a crash course on how to measure baseline.
I've watched you do it. I know how you do it, but I'm not going to do it that way because I don't want to overscore my deer. If I'm a half inch over, I'm going to be like, damn it.
Yeah, but it's correct,
Yeah.
sir.
Well, either way.
But I measured him up, so I tally him up, and I like to build like the suspense. Like, what do you think he went?
Yeah, he went around the table. So where are you guys at? I think I said like 187.
Yeah, and then everybody kind of was in that area. What'd you say, Ross?
I think I said 184.
By the way, we're up in my man cave celebrating this deer. I got a deadhead laying up in the middle of my beautiful man cave. So we're celebrating around this buck up in my man cave.
It's beautiful.
Having a few cocktails, having a few old fashions.
It's magical. It was magical. And I go to Awesome sitting across his bar. I'm like, what's your biggest archery buck right now to date?
I knew it was good when he said that.
And you were like 188 and whatever.
Make a Play-Doh snakes.
Oh, yeah.
And I reach over and I shake his hand. I'm like, you just killed your biggest archery buck, brother.
Oh shit.
It was cool, man. It was awesome. So I wish I could have stayed and got real drunk, but I had to be a dad that night,
I had a few.
Yeah, you should have.
Yep.
You should still be drinking a lot of them.
Well, I am.
I'm dude, absolute specimen of a whitetail
Monster.
It's
Mega.
100%.
Here's the thing. Once you started talking about this buck, I mean, I know from last year and whatever, but talking about him killing him this year, I'm like, this thing doesn't know that its days are numbered. Like, it's just, You know what I mean? You're a calculated guy. Like, this is not an accident.
No.
And anybody that's followed Working Class Bowhunter knows it's not an accident. I don't know, like, we kind of have this undertone that we're talking to people who don't know who you are.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of new listeners on this podcast with the controversy that this picture generated, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But
yeah,
when you spend an entire day prepping for that night's hunt, you know that there's a pretty good chance that deer's gonna. I didn't know that I'd get the shot, but I knew that I was probably going to see that deer.
Yeah,
and I was prepared as I could be. And, you know, I'll probably get some shit on the shot, which is understandable. All I'll say is, if you know us, you know how much we practice. This moose trip, I lived in my yard this summer, and I lived at 70 and 80 yards. Am I comfortable shooting at a whitetail at 70 or 80 yards? No. 50 yards? Yes, I'm very comfortable with that shot. And depending on the circumstances, you know, this deer gave me the perfect opportunity to exercise my comfortability with that long range shot. I mean, he was pushing my limits. You know, if he'd have been 58 or 9, might have elected to go ahead and let him walk. But I felt comfortable with the shot, and I went ahead and took it, and I'm glad that I did.
Yeah. I'm glad you did too. And I mean, dude, just an absolute stud, absolute beautiful buck,
monster.
To kill a moose, a mid-60s buck, and a 190. Is
in one season.
Truly a dream season, man.
It beat my best whitetail season by 4 or 5 inches. My prior best season was a 188 and a 158. So I can't remember the exact math, but it was like 4 or 5 or 6 inches. I beat my best season by, and then you throw in the moose.
You killed your biggest archery buck and your highest netting archery buck in the same season.
And a moose. Like I said, you literally can't script a season like that, and I'm so grateful for everything and the way it came together. Could I have done things a little different and had this turn into a perfect situation? Yeah. You know, if I would have elected to go in a couple hours after the shot and look at the blood for 30 yards, this whole social media shitstorm would have never been.
You know what I think, born. Austin? I think if you waited 3 hours to win it, he still would have been eaten.
And so we talked about this. Actually, my brother's son shot a deer this season, and they left him for 4 hours, and they came in, and that deer looked like this deer. I mean, he was down to the bones.
Well, Doug, you're big buck in 2017. Your 17 G2 buck, 17-inch G2 buck. How long you leave that buck?
An hour.
Probably an hour when we started tracking. Then the exit hole was probably 4 feet wide. They ate shit out of it. The exit hole.
That whole one side was gone.
They ate a whole side of a deer in an hour.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, imagine if you would have waited 4 hours.
They've been gone.
You'd have been like this.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've had deer get chewed on the ass before, but it's just kind of you deal with it.
Yeah.
I've been lucky. I've only let a few deer go overnight, and they've been fine. I had one deer, a doe that I shot, that I don't know what got into. This was years ago when I was really young. It freaked me out. I was young enough. It freaked me out. Something crawled into the entry hole and ate the guts out of the thing.
Whoa.
I don't know if it was a raccoon or a possum or what.
That'd freak you out a little bit.
I remember seeing, I was like probably 12, 13 maybe.
Yeah, I'd have been nervous coming up on any whitetail after that.
Yeah, I'm like,
No, where'd they go?
what the hell? It was weird.
Whoa.
Possums do that.
It was a possum, you think?
Definitely.
That was a long time ago. I remember like getting with my dad. My dad was like, what the fuck? So
I've seen them do it to cattle. They'll do
really?
the same thing. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Aliens.
Yeah.
I had, I shot that South Dakota mule deer, and the next morning I went in after him on a shot that was back, and there was 3 coyotes on him when I came up over the hill.
That's the famous deer that you went down the hill on the deer sled and slid right up next to him.
Yeah, that was my my deer sliding. That was fun. That took me back to being a kid.
I know. Didn't you accidentally delete that video?
No, I still have it.
Oh, I thought I asked you. We were looking for it to post it because you come down the hill and you're like, hey, buddy. You slide right up to this deer.
Yeah. I know. I still have it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to get that from you.
Yep.
But anyway, moral of the story, coyotes happen.
Yeah,
Yep.
Anybody that bow hunts long enough and plays this game understands this. And I've had a huge outpouring of support,
More so than anything.
Yeah, and so when we took these pictures, I didn't realize the shitstorm that it was going to cause, right? So I knew that some people were going to be upset about the condition of the deer, but Working Class Bowhunter podcast has never been about hiding anything or Photoshop or making anything look anything other than what it was naturally. So when I posted these pictures, I wanted to kind of illustrate the true story the way it happened. You know, if I saw a huge public figure that posted a picture with a deadhead and say, well, here's the buck that I shot, he's all cleaned up and European and everything, my first thought would be, okay, so what's the story with him? Like, why don't we see any field photos?
Or if you just capped him off.
Yep.
Or just the rack only, like, and everything else is gone.
Yeah, so I
looks like foul play.
I wanted to have all questions answered with a deer this caliber, and a lot of people didn't like that. And we've talked about this. We've got a little bigger spotlight on us now than we've ever had. I'm not just humble Austin farm boy / deer hunter anymore. You know, there's a lot of people watching what we're doing here. So it was probably not the right photo to post looking back on it. Yes, I wanted to tell the story, but we probably should have incorporated some Photoshop or something to tone the original picture down a little bit. So my apologies for that. I guarantee you I'll never post another one like that.
No. Honestly, after all that, I was like, if it wasn't for the podcast, I think we should all delete social media altogether.
I honestly, the first guy I thought of was the Mitch Rompola and the Rompola buck. I'm like, people look at that guy and they think, well, why would he do that? Well, I understand why he did it. He was a recluse. He was a lot like me. He's an introvert. He would just soon stay at home and do his own thing.
Yep.
So I understand why he did what he did.
Yeah.
And honestly, the last day I've been on the verge of deleting all my social stuff. If it wasn't for the podcast, it'd have already been done. But
well, that being said, though, so we had that post up, and we had it up majority of the day.
Yep.
And we actually had a Zoom meeting, like basically a company Zoom meeting for other stuff. And then kind of the second half, we talked about the photo. I'm like, well, what do we do? Like, there's probably just as much, if not more, positive feedback, and like, man, you guys show how it was. We appreciate that.
I'd say like 8% positive.
80%.
Yeah,
probably, right? And then it got to a forum, and then I talked about this in the past. I found a forum thread about me personally. I didn't kill a 190. It was just about how much I fucking sucked. And I'm like, damn, I don't have a 190 to patch up how much I suck.
It wasn't even about deer.
It was just about how much I'm a douchebag in a thread. It's like, and I don't know what forum it was. They're all come on, man. It's 2021. You're still on a forum. It's like 2003 type shit. So I'm reading this. I'm like, damn, it's the same thing. We're going back when Michael and Nick Munt, when we were talking to them in person, we were drinking, literally drinking beer with them. And Nick Munt was telling us this. He's like, Michael, you see this forum? Sending Michael all these forum links. And Michael's just, cool as a cucumber, just who he is, Man, don't read that shit. It's just a bunch of idiots on there. And Nick Munt said he's scrolling down and he reads a thread that says, man, that Nick Munt's a douchebag. And he said, he's like, what did I do? so then they kind of said that. And then I remember Larry Mack told us this. And he goes, I had a conversation with Waddell. And Waddell told me, if you're not pissing people off, you're not reaching everybody.
Well, this definitely wasn't intended to piss anybody off.
No.
When I posted this picture, I had no intentions of pissing anybody off or igniting any social media post. I mean, the deer is big enough to do that on his own, right?
Right. It's clearly transparency is what it was.
Yeah, and we talked about this. Like, if this deer would have been a forkhorn, would he have gotten the outrage that he got?
Wouldn't have. He wouldn't.
No fucking way.
Austin, I love this deer, but we got to move it over. My eyes can't do this anymore. Like, I'm focused on the antler than you, the antler, and my eyes.
Let's look at him from this way.
That's
I want to look
better.
at that big old botfly hole.
That whole time I'm trying to focus on you, and then the antler comes in. I'm like, Jesus, I'm about to lose it.
Show me that botfly hole.
Yeah.
Okay, so
or that bee hole.
Yeah, that's a bee hole, sir.
What's a pickup line?
You want to see my bee hole?
We're idiots. This is why people should hate us.
Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
for all the first-time listeners out there, welcome to the fucking show.
You're welcome. But I mean, anyway, it's just the forums and stuff. It's like, man, come on, and it is maybe a little shocking, but and my argument with it was like, man, if it was like a gut pile with like ripped open intestine and stuff, like that's graphic, that's guts, that's gruesome. I think if the head wouldn't have been touched, nobody would have had an issue because it's just literally ribs.
Well, and another big issue that people had was the fact that I was smiling in this picture.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't want to recover the deer that way, right? So
And no one would want to.
Everybody wants to walk up on an untouched buck like this. You know, you get robbed. I mean, we knew that the deer had died quickly, so that was my biggest concern with this whole thing. But I lost the meat, I lost the cape, I lost the good pictures, I lost the opportunity to drag him out and have that whole experience with my buddies. I mean, the hunter gets robbed in a situation like that.
Yeah.
So, but it's out of the hunter's control at that point.
Yeah, what do you do?
You're dealing with Mother Nature. I mean, we live in a house, right?
Tooth, fang, and claw.
Yeah.
Ted Nugent just said it on Rogan.
Yep. We live in a house. When we exit that bubble, we're in their world. And we forget that. Like, those coyotes have the right to that deer if they come up on it. And everybody's so pissed off at coyotes. Like, they're surviving. They're doing what coyotes do, you know.
Listen,
it's part of the circle.
They're doing the same thing we're doing.
Yep.
As much as it sucks,
Yeah.
what do you do, man?
We're in their world at that point, and we got to remember that.
Yeah.
So.
And as cold as it was that night, I mean, that's the thing. It drives coyotes to want to eat. I mean, they're hungry.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Makes everything move when it's
It
that
helps. It helps a big deer die if need be. But
Just in general,
otherwise-
animals are active. You know, they're out there.
When I walked up on that deer and I saw that I was going to recover that whitetail, that was the biggest thing that was important to me.
There's a sigh of relief in a way.
I was relieved on the blood trail because I knew that deer was dead. I knew that deer hadn't suffered. And yeah, I'm going to smile when I shoot my biggest whitetail. I don't have to apologize to anybody for smiling, and even when the deer's in that condition.
Exactly.
If you don't like that, then you can fuck off, I guess.
No, it's very. I cut off the I guess. Just fuck off because
Yep.
I mean you just said it right, dude. Perfectly right there. It's what it is. It's part of the situation. Mother Nature is brutal, man. It ain't
is.
kind. Get on the Instagram page. Nature's metal. That right there is like, man, this deer. This deer was not alive when coyotes started eating it.
Absolutely not. And I've seen that before. That's ugly. You know.
The amount of Instagram and Facebook messages we have got since we posted that initial photo of, I got sent a couple of crazy like time lapse photos of a doe bedded getting eaten alive by like 6 coyotes.
Could you imagine?
Oh, dude, the time lapse was like several hours into daylight long.
Ugh.
Like that is brutal.
Yep.
So I think
Ruthless.
it just, anyway, it's unfortunate, right? But the deer did die ethically. Your shot was great. And I mean, here's
He
the
didn't
problem.
suffer.
If I was getting bashed on a forum because I killed a 190 and a coyote ate it, out of your control, what do you do?
Well, like I said, it's hard to be mad when you shoot a big deer like this, but when people are questioning your character and your ethics, when that's the most important thing to you, it wears you down. You know,
right.
it got me down.
We could all tell that you're upset about that.
I felt so fucking terrible when we had that post that there was any like negative shit like that, because I know how you are. Like, you're an awesome guy. For you to go back and like want to reply to some of the congratulatory comments and have to sift through people being absolute fucking douchebags.
Yep.
Right.
So, we talked and I was like, I'm going to take that photo down, because all it turned into was a giant magnet for negativity. There's a lot of people like, man, you let the negative people win. Well, I get what they're saying.
My biggest concern was I wanted to show the real case situation. And like I said, our podcast has always been about
Transparency,
showing things
being honest,
the real way.
being straight
so
up.
that's why I was reluctant to take the picture down. But after we talked it over, that was the best move for the brand and for me.
Yeah, because what happened is we reposted it and you basically talk through like, hey, this is what it is. And it's like 100% positive comments. Yep. And you know what? It's like, man, all those people that were just being assholes, most of them didn't follow us because I looked.
Yeah.
And I blocked a lot of them because why have them in your life?
Right. We don't need that shit.
And
a lot of must be nice guys in there.
A lot of must be nice guys, the guys we always talk about, guys who are completely unfamiliar with our podcast. Same thing with those forums.
The guys that have hunted for 2 or 3 years and killed 4 does, and they're an expert. You know, that's the kind of people you're dealing with.
Exactly. So it's unfortunate, but we shout out to everybody who left a positive comment. And dude, our following has went up, the messages, the comments, the support has been insane, and we thank you so much. And I know
I've gotten, I bet, 200 or 300 messages in the last 2 days, and all of them positive. So thank you very much for the support, guys. I mean, I type the same thing a lot, like, appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot. Appreciate the support. And I really do. Like, I just want to say it here on the podcast for everybody listening. you know, it's nice to see that outpouring and that support. When you get stuck in a situation with like this where a lot of people are ripping at you, it's nice to see that a lot of people have your back and agree with you.
100%.
Pretty crazy too on all the negative comments, how many other people jumped in.
Oh yeah, once one person starts in, then all their buddies got to chime in too.
Yeah,
and with a deer like this, a lot of it's jealousy. You know, everybody.
Well, I mean, like the support of people that backed you up.
Yeah.
Oh
on
yeah,
the
for
negative
sure.
comments.
On the negative comments, right?
Yep.
Yeah, shout out to those people too. It's crazy, man. The internet's the devil.
Yep.
It is.
It's crazy. But no, dude, I think doing the repost was a good move, and yeah, everyone's just awesome that supports us, and it's cool like knowing the people that have our backs, and you know what I mean. It's like, man, I saw some shit. I don't want to even bring it up, but like comparing us to poachers.
Yeah,
and I'm like, clearly you have no fucking idea what we do here.
Fuck off.
That graphic photo really triggered a lot of people, and I can understand it now looking back on it.
Yeah, I'm eye rolling, to be honest.
But there's no reason for the comments and the things that were said. I mean, it's just people being petty and jealous.
Yeah.
I actually did a little homework on this, and I don't know if you want to share it or not. This podcast is going in a nice direction, so I don't know if you want to.
Let's share some stuff, dude.
Well,
I think so, right?
I've never been the kind of guy to brag on myself, and anybody that has followed us in the podcast knows this. I've never been the guy to toot my own horn, and you're always asking me, well, how many you got on the wall? I don't know. I don't keep track. So you told me, you're like, you need to go up there and do that for this podcast.
Yep.
So what I did is I kind of assembled an entire list of my whitetail career, if you will, for the people that were laughing at the word whitetail career, like I'm a pro staffer or something.
WCB Pro Staff. We give them like a 20% discount on hats.
Let me hit you with some knowledge.
Let me drop a bomb on you.
He's going to spit some game here, boys.
Drop the beat.
So for anybody interested, here is my bow hunting resume. We're just talking whitetails here, and we're just talking bucks. Okay. And I have my gun deer in here as well. So on these deer that I'm talking about, 5 of these are gun deer. So I've shot 3 under 125. One of them's a big 6. Okay. So 2 turds. I've got 4 in the 30s. One of those was a traditional archery buck. I've got 5 in the 40s. One of those are traditional. 3 of them are big 8s. Okay. So all stud 140s.
Yep.
I've got 6 in the 50s. I've got 5 in the 160s. I've got 2 in the 70s. I've got 2 in the 80s now, and I've got 1 in the 90s. That makes 16 deer over 150 inches. I started doing this in 1997, was unsuccessful on shooting a buck that season. 1998, I killed my first deer. So that makes 28 deer in 25 seasons. And I went on a 4-year dry spell when I was in college for obvious reasons.
Women.
Understandable.
Yes. So here's the archery statistics. So 5 of those deer were gun deer out of the 28. So we're going just archery now. Out of 28 deer in 25 seasons, I've wounded 4 deer. Okay.
That's pretty good.
So that's impressive in itself.
Yes.
You're talking about big animals. You're talking about, you're getting in the game. You're getting in the mix with archery equipment with 150 plus inch whitetails. Okay. We're not talking does here. I've hit 2 in the shoulder. One of those was in my very first season of bow hunting. So the big no-no, right? You stay off the shoulder. So I've done that twice in 25 years. I hit 1 high at 10 yards in 2015, and I hit 1 in the throat in 2005. It was a late season hunt. I had a park on, didn't get my anchor point right, hit him in the throat. Okay, so that's 4 wounds in 25 seasons. I have missed 3. One of those was my traditional archery buck that I got the second shot on. One was a deer that ducked me at 40 yards, and one was a yardage misjudge when I was 15 years old.
It's impressive, man.
In 25 seasons, I've basically missed 2 deer.
Man, that's got to be up there with, like, if someone calculated their seasons, that's up there, man.
Anybody else that wants to come forth and give me shit on ethics, I'll be right here.
I think that's a
well said.
Very fair.
Very fair.
And I think very justified to list that out on a podcast because, you know, there's some mad haters listening.
Well, people want to understand my ethics. That's my honest resume. So I'm not the guy out there throwing shots at 70 yards hoping to get lucky. I don't shoot at a deer unless I'm going to kill it.
Right.
So we left, and I've got that wrote down. I left 3 deer overnight, coyotes got 2 of them. Yeah, that's it. So those are the points I wanted to make, I guess. I mean, ethics are extremely important to me. The most important thing in bow hunting. You know, usually guys that are traditional archers aren't going to cut corners, and I pride myself in being a traditional archer. I jump back and forth, obviously, between the two, but I've always been an ethical bow hunter, and anybody that says otherwise just doesn't know me.
100%. Yeah, definitely, dude. And I think we're going to start making Austin Chandler baseball cards. Because damn, son, the stats on that are that's a collectible right there.
It is.
Like you said,
It's a holographic.
I don't
bow hunting career.
I hate doing this because it's not me. I don't want to. I don't want to talk about myself. I don't want to build myself up. But I feel like I need to defend myself on this platform.
Sometimes the Lord's got to flex a little.
Yeah,
you know
sorry
what I
for
mean?
flexing. Anybody that wants to measure, come on over.
Yeah. Hey, well, we need to make an Austin Chandler baseball card and put it in a little resin case, and we'll have it right there in the studio between the signs. I had a Michael Jordan basketball card like that.
Oh, gotcha. Sometimes the Lord's got to bring the locust. Fuck shit up.
Dude, I think it's cool that you listed that because there's probably a lot of people just curious. I think it's interesting, man. It's you've been a staple in the working class bow hunter interviews, and if anybody has to question that, most of your deer stories in the last 5 years are on record.
Yeah, I mean,
fresh.
And
like,
honestly, most of these deer I have on video. So if there's ever any discrepancy on legalities or ethics or any shot, like come and watch the video.
And even then too, like to clarify, I'm not saying that like we're like all knowing on game laws and stuff, because there's a lot of game laws are designed to fuck people over, so you have to pay a fine. They are. We've argued about in one of our chats of what this regulation is when you read it here in this front page of the book, but once you get into the pamphlet or the book, it reads it different. What's right? You call a game warden, they don't even know sometimes.
Yeah.
Like,
The verbiage is like, what the fuck does this even mean?
On a lot of it, it's designed to screw you. Now, we're not talking tags like, oh shit, you didn't have a tag and you killed the buck, you thought you just get away with it. And we're not talking that.
Right.
We're talking like, finable type offenses. Now, if one of us did that knowingly or then got caught and found out about it, would we talk about it on the podcast and up to 100% we would. Right. I would actually prefer to be upfront and talk about it if I like got a ticket for something.
Yeah.
Just like, I thought I was, or I wasn't aware. I paid my $150 fine and then whatever it may be.
Sure.
It's better to be upfront and transparent rather than to be like, oh, the lady at Farm King deleted all my tag history that I bought. I don't know what fucking happened. Like, come on, brah. What are we doing?
You ain't joking nobody.
You could just be like, I didn't fucking look and I thought it was there and it wasn't there. I fucked up. That would be the easier route.
Right.
And pay your fine and do the thing you got to do. I get it. Not every fuck up is a let's burn this dude at the stake type fuck up.
Sure.
So that being said, if something ever does come down the line, no, we will own it and we will talk about it. Mm-hmm. And so you're not going to see us talking about it's just a fucking speeding ticket type bullshit. You know what I mean? So just to clarify.
Yep.
And that's just being real about it. You know what it is? Because it's easier to just face your issues head on, and it just gets worse when you try to bury it.
Yeah,
like
sweep it under the rug.
Right. Like so many guys we've seen that are big time TV outdoor channel famous in the past. We don't need to name names. We know. But that just being said, it's like you got to own that stuff, man. It's just part of being a human being, and people fuck up sometimes. What do you do? But in this case, you didn't, and I love that you listed that off. And I am so proud of you, man, for being
I am too.
calculated. And this deer did not suffer. And
here he is.
Well, like I said, it was I've said this several times, but this is my new pinnacle of my bow hunting career. I mean, how do you get any more epic than that?
Dude, you don't.
It's freaking giant.
Absolute stud.
In the end, if Mother Nature wouldn't have screwed me over, this would have been a Cinderella story. I mean, absolutely perfect. So unfortunate the way the deer was recovered, but it's the ugly truth when you're a bow hunter,
Coyote Palooza for working class bow hunter just got a little more interesting.
And I don't know if we're ready to close, but I've got something I want to close with if we are.
Wherever you want to go, man. If you think there's more to talk about, it's your podcast.
How you guys feeling? You guys ready to close? You got anything else you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I guess one thing I should say is if people are new here and listen to this whole podcast, they might not understand. A lot of people who do listen know how we are and we joke around. Yep. Sometimes we say things we don't mean. When we say a lot of things sarcastically in good fun, as in like giving your buddy shit. Mm-hmm. Like when I'm like, meet us at the trade show, fucking fight us. I don't really mean that. But if you want to come fight us, yes, we'll probably fight you. But
I don't really mean that, but I mean it.
Or you just want to come have a beer. I mean,
we ain't no
it's cool
bitch.
too.
But what I'm obviously just kind of being hard-headed as kind of like to get a rise out of I'm trying to make the podcast fun.
Right.
And I say a lot of stuff in podcasts, and over the almost 500 we've done, I say a lot of things that I don't actually fully believe in because I know it's funny or people get that I'm not being serious.
Yeah, there's a little sarcasm in there for people that aren't used to the platform.
Yeah, and I do that a lot. Almost every episode I do it. And it's almost even
we all do it.
We all do it, but I feel like I'm worse at it. I'm like probably the guy who does the most of it. And it's all kind of for fun. Like, I don't want a podcast that's like Q&A, and I'm not listening to the answer. I'm just thinking about my next question.
That's no fun.
I want to make it fun. So that's what we're doing. So if you ever get offended by that stuff and any of these conversations we have, I'm just relax. It's not for real. I'm, you know what I mean? We're just having a good time. We're talking shit.
Fun.
We're talking shit. It's funny. Now, if we really want to talk shit about you, we'll call you out. See what I'm doing? I'm going back. I'm doing it.
We don't know. Is he joking? I don't know.
But if you're upset, fuck you. You know what I mean? See, I'm doing it again. See, I trapped myself into that, and that's what it is. But it's a good time, I think.
And I do, if I can say something, I do want to throw this in there. I am one of the lucky guys that gets to hunt some of Austin's farms, and anyone that would question his integrity as a bow hunter should, well, he probably won't be invited to see his farms, but they're literally whitetail and turkey playgrounds. Mm-hmm. And the dude does it right all the time. And I was there with Ross and Austin on his recovery, and I think he did everything 100% legit.
For sure.
And
Appreciate it, dude.
Nothing you can do about it. It's Mother Nature.
Yeah.
So
Definitely. I mean, that's really all there is to say.
Yeah.
to walk up on a whitetail of that caliber is unbelievable. Unfortunate with the coyotes, but
What do you do?
Insane animal, and all the respect to the animal. I mean,
Yeah.
they don't grow them like that every year, boys.
You just don't see them.
Nope.
You just don't see them.
I have not seen one yet like that. So
I've got something that I got something that I want to close with if
Yeah.
we're ready to close.
Yeah.
I got a really nice message from somebody, and
Oh yeah, this is good.
yeah, I
Forgot.
figured people would enjoy this. So I had a really nice guy start following me on Instagram. I don't know if you guys have heard of him or not. His name's Joe Rogan,
I heard of him. I think
and
Never heard of him.
he's got that podcast called Joe Rogan Experience.
I think it's something I've heard of it.
The UFC guy.
Yeah,
that's the
that's
UFC guy. Yeah, got it.
So I messaged
gained some
him
good
after he
traction.
started following me, and I said, "Hey Joe, appreciate you following me. What's your take on all of this controversy about my buck?" And Joe says, "Hey brother, my take is there's a lot of people out there that weren't taught how to think. They automatically criticize everyone they can while avoiding turning that same attention on themselves. People just love to be negative. It's sad and it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. What you did is exactly what everyone knows you're supposed to do. Don't let it get you down." And I said, "Man, it really means a lot hearing that from you. Thank you for the response. You fucking rock, dude."
That's awesome.
That is so awesome.
Joe fucking Rogan, man.
I'd like to close it with that, boys.
Good way to close it. You know what to do. Go shoot your bow. We love ya.